It is noon on the day of the speaker series here with Ryan Hansen. I guess it's time to get started. We're seeing people join from all over the state. So I guess as people are joining, I am going to hand it over to Philip Britton to welcome us and kick us off today.
Thank you, Jenny. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Scaling Montana Speaker Series for today. I hope you've all been having a very joyous holiday season so far, and it continues to be joyous. Thanks all for joining us today. Really thrilled to have a great and growing crowd here. And I'm excited to introduce today's featured speaker. My name is Philip Britton. I'm the chairman of the board of Scaling Montana, and this is our last speaker series event for 2024. Speaker Series has been a new program for us this year, and we're super pleased with how it's been going so far. But we're constantly trying to, striving to bring you more valuable speakers, topics, formats to engage and connect the technology community here in Montana and beyond. So please don't hesitate to reach out to Jenny or me if you have any suggestions on the format, topic, on potential speakers, or any way that we can improve this program as we go into 2025. Constantly looking to make things better and more useful. Now, before we dive in, quick reminder, this is a live session, and we encourage all of you who are here today to participate and ask questions. So the format, as always, is first roughly 30 minutes of fireside chat between Jenny and Ryan. And then the second half, roughly 30 minutes, again, we'll do Q&A, live Q&A. You can drop your questions into the chat and we'll try to get to as many as we can. And we may also just, have hands up depending on how many chat questions we get. The event is also being recorded and will be posted online, hopefully next week. So if you have anybody you know who would have loved to be here, but they couldn't have been, you can share it with them. Or if you want to go back and listen again, of course, you can always do that. Now, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce Ryan Hansen, who's the founder of LumenAd and most recently Ledger AI. And for those of you who may not know, LumenAd was founded here in Montana and became a trailblazer in digital advertising technology. Under Ryan's leadership, the company not only grew to prominence as one of the fastest growing private companies in the country in 2019, as named by Inc. on their fast list, but also became known as a true digital advertising expert, all while remaining staunchly committed to growing its footprint in Montana. Now, today, Ryan has moved on and is focused on his next big bet, Ledger AI, which uses AI to optimize back office functions for small and medium-sized businesses. So very anxious to hear all about his thoughts on what he's up to, about entrepreneurship, and of course, about the future of AI in business from a very practical point of view. Ryan will be joined today by our very own Jenny Graff, who will lead the conversation. Ryan, thanks so much for joining us today. Super excited to have you here and to hear everything you have to say. Welcome. Jenny, over to you.
Thanks, Philip.
All right, we got a packed house over here in Bozeman, so thank you, Ryan. It's so fun to see you. Honestly, it's like anytime I get a chance to catch up with you is a good day. Like, I think you've got some words of wisdom, and honestly, to share your experience and your story with this community is going to be pretty fun, I think.
Thanks, Jenny. Yeah, thanks for having me. It's I'm getting a kick out of seeing the people join. There's plenty of people on here who could easily join me in this conversation. As some LumenAd OGs are on this call, so it's going to be fun, and they're going to keep me honest. It's
so true. We promised we won't turn this into a roast. This is, but you're amongst friends here.
It could have easily been a roast. Yeah. So yeah.
So Ryan, bring us back to the beginning. I know a lot has happened, but tell us a little bit, everybody wants to hear the origin story of LumenAd. Tell us the story of when you started out, what were you seeking to accomplish with LumenAd and what was the inspiration there?
Yeah, LumenAd in the early days was a pretty cavalier idea. I come from a family of entrepreneurs, and I knew that I always wanted to start my own business. And I didn't have aspirations to do what LumenAd, ultimately PathLabs, became. I just wanted to be able to be my own boss. And so one thing that always made sense to me, just that seemed common sense to me, was I was less interested in finding something that I was super passionate about, and I was more so interested in finding some problem to solve. And so I was in the world of GIS after college, and just some of the work that we were doing there, I got exposed to the universe of the way that technology is merging with advertising. And so the further I dug into that, I realized that there was this really big discrepancy. Now, this is 2014, that there was a really big discrepancy between what was possible in the world of technology first advertising versus what was generally accessible to most small businesses at the time. And that's all I knew. I have an accounting degree. I had literally never thought about marketing before. And I think that comes as a surprise to people. I wasn't necessarily super passionate about advertising. I just saw that there's this big discrepancy. And if we could democratize those technology first capabilities, that if we could solve that problem, then that's probably something that at least would pay the bills so that I could just go do my own thing. So in the early days, what we were doing was, back in 2014, the idea of online advertising was not super, how you did it was not super obvious to most small business owners. And most of them were still running ad campaigns like they were in like the 90s. And so all we did was say like, hey, your audience is online. There's lots of different places that they're spending time at online. And so the way they're accessing the internet and what they do once they get there is very fragmented. And so that requires a lot of technology, and like there's a technology component that's missing in your marketing strategy. And so we're going to help you figure that out. And we just created some business cards. Some folks in Bozeman helped us create the brand for it. And we literally knew nothing other than like, here's a slide deck, listen to our slide deck and let us solve this problem for you. And it wasn't until somebody said like, yes, okay, here's $500, where we forced to say like, okay, wow, shoot, somebody wants to buy this. Now, how do we go actually deliver on that? And then we just figured it out. And we slowly but surely, we optimized into realizing that the real opportunity is working directly with the ad agencies. They're the marketers. They can bring the marketing strategy, and we can bring the technology strategy and implementing that technology. And that allowed us, by like 2016, we started leaning into just starting to work almost exclusively with ad agencies. And that allowed us, like, we acquired one customer, but they had 30 customers. And so we grew pretty quickly in 2016. And we started to just build our own internal tools to help us like do that work more efficiently. Because there was no sort of like workflow data management tools that were out there that like available off the shelf that allowed us to do this. So we just started building our own internal tools. And again, we can get into this if anybody's interested in the Q&A. I don't want to go too deep, but eventually what we grew into was a set of services that had a lot of competitors in the landscape. And so there was a lot of the competition for media management, selling to agencies, was something that was not necessarily terribly unique, especially once we got to that mid-market level. And so we were struggling to differentiate ourselves on just like media placement for ad agencies. And so people started to be more interested in the software that we were using to do the work. And so we started to like get some of that market feedback to say like, why don't we just go optimize into, instead of being services, like tech-enabled services, why don't we go sell the software, because that's more differentiated. So that's what led us into what LumenAd ultimately becoming more software. Those are the early days.
In the early days. Okay, we're going to dive into that some more, because I know you glossed over a few parts, a couple bits there. But I'm curious, so I mean, in so many ways, like you came up in, like you grew kind of a business during like the advent of marketing analytics. Like, did you, like when you were building, did you feel like you were on the precipice of and like really adding a ton of value? Did you feel like you were early adopters? Were you like, in terms of like riding that wave of like where data was all of a sudden like the name of the game in marketing, like were you ahead of it, or were you like slightly behind? And tell me a little bit more about like the small and medium-sized business and why that was like such an area of focus for you guys.
Yeah, I think the way that we thought about it was not so much like, again, marketing analytics is this massive universe, and it exploded while we were also in the space. We were so heads down focused on just this like little corner of like digital first advertising, which is a little corner of it, which is of course like tons of technology, tons of data involved. But we were more so just obsessed with this idea that it's just actually hard for most brands to reach their customers online anymore, right? So we were a couple of years after the proliferation of social media and the mobile phenomenon that had already happened by the time that we started. But the way that advertising caught up to that was a few years behind that. And so what we really benefited from was all of the core technology that's used to reach online audiences became super available. It's just that those are very complicated, very sophisticated systems that our market, the small and mid-sized market, was never going to be able to fully comprehend. And so that immense amount of fragmentation, the immense amount of complicated systems was the trend that we rode, that was fortuitous timing for us that worked out really well.
Interesting. I just want to at some point, and it'll be interesting, as we kind of carry this story arc to understand where are the parallels, where are the opportunities, how did your experience at LumenAd kind of grow into the opportunity that you saw and are now creating with Ledger AI? But let's hold there. Let's not go into that quite yet, because there's still more to talk about with the story of LumenAd. So tell us about the time that I think we were actually most familiar. I got to see you way more during that time, 2019 to 2021. I think about this a lot because I'm working with technology companies, I'm working with software companies. A lot of times they're should we be a service company? Should we be a software company? I think of LumenAd as a real case study in terms of kind of how you navigated that whole trajectory. So walk us through 2019 to 2021 in LumenAd's era.
Yeah, so LumenAd became a pretty well-known name by about 2019, and I think we were a startup that most people had heard of by then. And I think from the outside looking in, we looked like we were growing super fast. We looked like we had it all figured out. The reality is we had nothing figured out. But we grew pretty fast there because we acquired these customers who had this cross-channel ad placement management problem that we solved for them. And again, when we were selling into marketing agencies, the economics, the lifetime value of one marketing agency for LumenAd was massive. These are big deals. And so we were growing really fast, but we had not yet cracked the code on how to predictably and repeatably acquire another customer. And so we were constantly making tons of little iterations trying to figure out okay, we know that when we acquire a customer, we can keep them, but for some reason we can't necessarily convince why the next that next lead of ours, we can't necessarily nail the value prop. And so it was a lot of that experimentation that led to us being all right, well, maybe it's because the services are not that terribly unique. And so at the time I was just reading a bunch of TechCrunch, and if you're not building SaaS in a startup, are you even cool? And so we drank the Kool-Aid on TechCrunch and was okay, SaaS, we have to be SaaS. And we literally rebuilt the business around a software supported with services, all the while maintaining this this massive book of services revenue that we then converted into what we thought we had converted into software. And so in 2019, we raised a seed round from Next Frontier. Shout out to those guys. Those guys are great. And we had this growth thesis built entirely on SaaS. And 2019, we were number 29 on the Inc. 500, and it was this big deal. And again, we looked like we had it figured out. By 2021, after pushing super hard on the SaaS first strategy, we were we literally pulled the plug on it, and so it's the highs and the lows of the journey of LumenAd is just bananas, right? We were psyched in 2019. By 2021, after pushing on it for so long, we realized that we were two companies. We were not a SaaS supported with services company. We had a services business and we had a software business. And who we were selling software to is not who we were selling services to, and vice versa. And that's very problematic, mostly because we had raised money, right? We had raised a seed round, telling investors that this is a SaaS business, and the economics of that and the potential upside of that is much larger than services. Had we have just stayed a bootstrapped company, it wouldn't have mattered how we classify that revenue, right? Because it's just as long as we have customers and we're keeping them and they're finding value in what we're doing, it doesn't really matter. But to outside investors, it matters a lot. And so we had to, come 2021, I went back to Next Frontier and I was like, guys, like we do not have this figured out. We are not on a path. We can't keep talking about like how we like go forward. We have to like go all the way back to step one and start completely over. And so fortunately we had plenty of revenue and thus cash to buy out investors and just say, guys, I'm sorry, this isn't working. Like we're more than happy for you to stay in, but if you want us to buy you out, we'll buy you out because like we have to go back to square one. And so, again, so that's the story of 2019 to 2021. And that's when we made the decision to spin off the services business from LumenAd, and that's called PathLabs. In 2021, we also said like, okay, well, the tech debt, there's so many problems, and we can talk about the software product itself and all of the problems that came from us trying to like take an in-house, like kind of organically grown internal tool, turn it into SaaS, and then scale that. Just the landmines that are there are just impossible to avoid, and we hit every single one of them. And so we can get into the weeds on that. And if anybody is trying to convert a services business into a software company, you should definitely talk to me because it is riddled with landmines. And I even like people were telling us that at the time, and I was like, yeah, but for us, we're good at this. Like we're fine. We had no business like being that confident about it. And there's people on this call who were very helpful in trying to help us figure that out. And I see you, Chad. It's been a long time. I want to talk to you. But so that's where, everybody was hearing about LumenAd in 2019, 2020. Come 2021, LumenAd was almost like non-existent, right? Because we had, as a one last ditch effort, we decided we were going to peel off the services business, and we called that PathLabs, and LumenAd was the software business. Eventually, we made the decision to just sunset the LumenAd software entirely because we were going to have to rebuild it. And by 2021, 2022, we were like, well, if we have to rebuild this software, would we rebuild the same thing we set out to build 4 years ago? No, because some of those things are solved problems. We do it completely differently. So then we kind of were like, well, let's go back all the way to square one and see like what is our like technology thesis at all. Meanwhile, PathLabs honed its it no longer had to deliver services through this technology lens and could articulate its own value prop in a way that allowed it to get more clear and more specific with who its customers are. And then, PathLabs is a different story of what just turned into this unbelievable success story selling services, which also has a lot to do with what we're doing going forward in terms of services over software. But yeah, we can get into that.
So I'm curious, I remember when, we were kind of working on we're going to develop a software for a software company. And then there was when the official split between PathLabs and LumenAd happened, it was well, we're going to have to way prune back the technology because we've really overdeveloped it because we're so in the weeds. We're such experts in this area, which obviously informed a ton of the software development at the time and a ton of PathLabs operations. But so where is that software IP right now is my question. Is PathLabs still operating on that software? And was that part of the value in your acquisition by MIQ?
MIQ owns that software. They asked us a lot about the software when in the M&A process, and they own it. There's not a lot of value in it. PathLabs is no longer using it. There's some off-the-shelf tools now that PathLabs uses to run that business. But no, it's I think there was one annual company all hands. I think it was 2023 where we had a company dinner up at Snowball, and we actually had a funeral for the LumenAd software, complete with a tombstone and the whole thing. So it was hilarious. I think there's a video of it somewhere, but no, it's dead. And that's, to anybody who's been involved at PathLabs or the services side of LumenAd, celebrates the hell out of that being dead. It's a sad, yeah, it's complicated.
Yeah, but smile on your face and a hell of a good attitude about it. I can't imagine it was like that when you were kind of making those decisions in 2021, huh?
No. Yeah, again, there's even more people on this call who are part of that decision. And that it was so hard. But again, we had the optionality because we no longer had investors. We had not raised that much money. We had a services business that paid the bills. We had more time, more cash to make more mistakes and to figure it out, right? So the us having that services business allowed us more time to figure out what was the right model. Otherwise, we would have ran out of cash, and it would have been over a long time before that. So it was like unimaginably difficult at the time to have to make some of those calls.
I feel for you.
Yeah.
But it looks like, just judging by the chat, it looks like you're not the only one that's been through that process. We can commiserate together.
Yeah, it should be like its own support group. Yeah.
Start a Slack channel. Hey, so I want to move on. I want to talk a little bit about you've always had this pretty relentless growth orientation. I don't think you ever wanted to be a solo entrepreneur, even though you were going into a services business, and that was what you were focused on. So tell us a little bit about what's your rationale for that? What's the driver there, and how has that worked out?
Yeah, for anybody who's heard me talk about this in the past, I'm sorry, I'm going to repeat myself, and I'm going to say, some of the same things that I just hammer home every single time. But within the context of this relentless pursuit of growth, it was not growth for growth's sake, but it was more so this idea of we have to continue to push super hard on this until we can figure out what is our predictable and repeatable customer acquisition model. We have to have a model for growth. If we just because we have a business and we have customers does not mean that we necessarily know how to grow. And because we were fine as economically before we had that figured out, but if we lost one or two customers and we didn't necessarily know how to acquire another one, this business is not a going concern. So I was, even though I was not necessarily on day one in 2014, set it out to build some massive business, I wanted a future-proof business. And to me, a future-proof business has to be able to answer those questions of how do I go acquire a customer? How do I truly articulate my value prop? What is my unique value prop to what specific customer profile? And what are the channels that we're going to use to grow? And if I want to grow faster, how do I invest where to be able to turn those knobs, right? Mm-hmm. And so much of LumenAd, PathLabs looks like an overnight success, but it was an overnight success 7 years in the making of figuring out what is the thing that allows us to go answer those fundamental questions. And it just took us a really long time, and we held ourselves to a very high bar to say okay, yeah, now this is the thing. So most of it's that we were actually just all of the pushing, all of the experimentation, all of the iteration was just in pursuit of that. But I will also say too that it feels contradictory to say, but there's a lot of things about being bigger that make running a business easier. There's things that you have to figure out. There's things that you have to learn in terms of just going from a family to a village to a city, type of size comparisons. And there's lots of growing pains there. And we got our ass kicked on a lot of those things. But the bigger you get, the more economies of scale you have to hire experts to help you in any one of those in any one of those areas. And you can, and it's that it's honestly a lot. I'm not trying to just easily transition this into my next thing, but it honestly has a lot of the getting to an economies of scale where you can have a really robust back office. So there's experts on the finance, there's experts in the HR and the payroll, FP&A, there's IT and lots of other parts of the back office that I'm missing. That's really miserable to do if you're small. And it's that exact issue that we're trying to take with what we're doing with Ledger. But sometimes being bigger is easier, can be easier.
So I think it's interesting. I mean, let's shift into Ledger AI, because I think that story and the lessons learned from LumenAd obviously are very applicable today and will be interesting to this audience. But I'm curious, with your background in accounting and where you're going with Ledger AI, sorry, I got ahead of myself. How about you talk us through what is Ledger AI? Where are you going with it? And why are you starting in kind of bookkeeping and accounting?
So it's funny, it's called Ledger AI, and but we're not doing this deep AI technical innovation work. It's an applied AI company, right? We are using we're applying the technologies that exist to a very specific use case. And so in a way, it's any company that's starting in 2024 should be doing the same thing. So it's kind of calling it anything AI is kind of redundant, right? In the sense that this is just the new normal for starting a business. And and just how people are going to solve problems moving forward. So we are not doing anything in the deep technical AI domain. I just bought ledger.ai 4 years ago as a domain, and so we stuck with it. So I have this strong opinion, and it's honestly a lot of what we learned going from LumenAd to PathLabs, again, drinking a bunch of Kool-Aid in SaaS in 2018, only to not only to like really struggle through that, convert to services and have it flourish and just explode in growth from a growth perspective. We're kind of like taking those same learnings to the back office. And so we have this kind of like hot take that a lot of people on this call might want to fight me about, and which is fine. But I think the future, SaaS had its day in the limelight over the last couple of decades. I think the future is all about services, and I think AI is going to unlock a lot of what made services a frustrating revenue model moving forward. But if you think about what impact AI is going to have in the world, again, so I live in the world of like B2B. I know B2B really well. I don't pretend to know like B2G or B2C. Or just like pure technology, like innovation either. So like I know the world of like B2B software and services really well. And so I'm kind of like coming at this from that point of view. So your world may be different, but in my world, I think that services are, what's going to happen is that AI is going to dramatically decrease the cost of developing software. So yes, there's a lot of software today, but there's about to be just an absolute explosion in software and tools and technologies. And that's going to be great. And they're going to get very specific and very niche for use cases. But people today already have app fatigue and software fatigue. And moving forward, people are not going to have much of an interest, at least in the B2B space, in trying to like adopt a lot of new tools and technologies, because like the landscape is always going to be changing. It's going to be a lot to keep up on. And really what people are going to want, and what PathLabs validated, is like people don't really want to click buttons. People want to solve a business problem. And it's way better to do that with services than pure play software alone. Again, that might be a hot take, but so with Ledger AI, we're taking this strong stance that the future is services, but it's still SaaS. But instead of software as a service, it's services as software. And services in the future are going to act a lot more like software, thanks to like they can scale much faster because they're going to be supported, and humans that are going to be in the loop are going to be supported by a bunch of tools that turn them into superhumans. And so Ledger AI is just this idea that we are going to go solve the back office problem that right now is very fragmented. Like people work with accountants, people work with bookkeepers, people work with fractional IT, payroll, et cetera. Again, this is like in the small to medium sized world. There needs to just be like holistic fractional back office, not fractional individual services. And so we're going to provide those services, but we're going to stitch them together, applying a bunch of AI tools and technologies, but to just like make humans 100 times more efficient, but to make sure that they maintain that personal level of connection with these small business owners, because that's ultimately what somebody wants a person to talk to at the end of the day.
But you're also, I mean, it's not like you're just looking and kind of stitching together kind of the best in class, like little pieces of the ecosystem or little pieces of, starting with your beachhead of accounting and bookkeeping. Like you're going deep, like you're basically operationalizing like an entire like CPA accounting firm. Like tell us a little bit more like about how that's going to work.
Yeah. So what we're going to do is, and it's thanks to, having some access to capital now that doesn't hurt. But what we're going to go do is we're just going to go acquire these service providers. We're going to acquire bookkeeping companies, payroll companies, HR companies, IT companies that are providing a service that people find value in today. And but it can be much more holistic, right? And so we're going to acquire these companies, we're going to stitch them all together, and we're going to then rearrange the go-to-market. And instead of selling bookkeeping services horizontally to a bunch of different verticals, we're going to go vertical by vertical and say we're going to sell fractional back office for restaurants, fractional back office for physicians or for dentists or et cetera. So again, the future is very niche. Like it has to get like very specific. And that's okay. Like historically, there wasn't enough value in the solution to get really like super specific on a niche. But when you combine services with the software and you deliver on these like holistic solutions, it unlocks a lot more value that people are willing to pay for. So the markets for these, what otherwise used to look really small, will get quite a bit bigger. And so that's our thesis at Ledger AI.
I think it's awesome. I mean, I think it's really exciting, and everything. Obviously, AI is so massive right now and it's moving so fast. I am by no means an expert, but it does line up with everything that I've read, which is largely like it still needs to be human-centered design. Humans will be at the decision, like the center of decision making, but at the end of the day, like all of these things will be tech enabled, and you're basically just enabling better decision making through like really living and breathing kind of the operational side of things and enabling small and medium-sized businesses.
That's right. Yeah. And I mean, like from the evolution of like the ingredients that go into delivering those solutions will change a lot over the years, right? Like it might be, if the AI tech and AI agents develop way faster, there might be more tech and AI in our solution and a little bit of people. But if not, it's going to be mostly people and a little bit of AI. It doesn't matter because the end solution should look very similar to like what people are like the problem people are paying to solve. And so for us, it's the customer experience will still feel like it will be accessed mostly through a platform, and you might not even know if you're talking to Penny, our AI agent, or you're talking to a human. They don't really care how they get the answer. They just want the right answer. They want it fast, and they want it to be relevant, and they want to trust it, and within the context of their business. So again, it's going to be this like, I think the future is going to be fascinating, and I'm just like super interested in building a company in this like new normal. I have this thesis, and if history is any guide, it will change, and a lot of it will be wrong. And I'll be here in 20 years telling you about something completely different. Who knows? Yeah. Anyways, yeah.
Well, you've demonstrated, I think, rather strongly that you're capable of pretty aggressive pivots. So I commend you for that, and also for living to tell the tale and being eager and hungry to go after the next big challenge. I mean, it's not like you're solving small problems over there. You're going after some pretty massive markets.
Yeah, it helps to just be really like overly confident and naive and just like to not really know what you're getting into. And then you just have to kind of like, once you're in it, then you have to figure it out. So there is no option. So it served me well in the past.
I love it. Well, we covered a lot of ground, and it was intended to just be kind of a teaser. And the real reason why we have these conversations is so that the audience can, ask you their burning questions. So with all of that, I am going to just open it up to the audience to see what they want to know from you. And I am seeing that John Romano has a question. So John, you want to go ahead and give us your hot take and your question?
Yes, appreciate it. Thank you, Ryan. A great talk you had there. My name is John Romano with Disaster Central, and we're characterize ourselves as a SaaS company, though still early stage. We have an MVP. But my question relates to when you built your company and you got funded, did you serve as your own business analyst? Did you have a CTO any time pre-funding, or did you have a full-time CTO during your growth phase, if you will? And those basic questions.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for asking that question, John. And it's actually tied to I see Mike in the comments wants to hear more about the landmines, which I can get into. And so your question about the CTO is one of my landmines. We did not have a founding CTO. We had, and so like one of my like point of views moving forward, and this is like not necessarily what I'm suggesting to be like a universal truth, but it was just true for me, was that like if I'm doing anything in technology moving forward, I need a technical co-founder. I had people try to tell me early on, like you're not thinking enough about like the tech stack. You're not thinking enough about like you're not creating like this like engineering first culture or whatever. What we were trying to do was required some like technical chops, and I thought we could just hire for that. And turns out like that was so difficult. We were like, I have an accounting degree, and like we did not have like that technical like visionary leadership early on to help us like see around corners as we were building stuff that like very quickly turned into massive tech debt. Right? Massive tech debt. That was so hard to unwind. And we would have had like, so anyways, I can't suggest strongly enough, like having a technical co-founder if you're getting into something technical. Now that might not necessarily be true. If you're getting like the future of SaaS, and if it's a like pure play SaaS, like that might be starting to get easier as like AI is going to make it a little bit more possible to build software and prototypes and whatever. So the future might be different than the past in that. I'm not sure, but I wouldn't risk it. John, I don't know. Did I answer your question?
Yes, I think you did. This phase for us, I've primarily been having to carry out that function of a CTO and founder combination. And it's been a real learning curve, obviously, for me, along with developing a business model and so forth. And so I was just curious about what your experience was, and you answered it quite clearly, and I appreciate that. I copious notes over that.
Yeah. Good luck.
Definitely an important lesson that we see playing out a lot. So go ahead, you guys. John raised his hand, and that's like helping me out because I'm running the Zoom here from Bozeman. And so, okay, we got questions for Bozeman. Evan.
I guess we're already finished. Hold on.
Yeah.
So Ryan, you talked about, going back to LumenAd, you talked about one of the key things you had to solve. You were talking about growth, and I like what you said. You weren't necessarily focused aggressively on growth, but you just needed to get to the point where you could reliably add new customers and acquire new clients. What wound up being the solution? Like, when you got to the point where you felt like you could reliably acquire customers, how did you do that? What did that look like? Because I like to reliably acquire customers too.
Yeah. So we didn't crack that nut until year 7 with PathLabs, where we were iterating on the solution a lot during like the LumenAd days, and it got really convoluted and really complicated really fast, right? We had a meaningfully sized services business that we then brute forced into software, and we were trying to I don't think we were asking the hard enough questions early on to really tease out what needed to happen, because we were kind of kludging value props together. There was some services messaging value props in there with some software value props messaging, and we were kind of taking a solution and we were trying to justify and force a problem statement to it. And so it wasn't until we literally admitted defeat and said we have to go back to square one here and answer fundamental questions as if we are a brand new startup. What is this? And to our benefit, we actually weren't a brand new startup. We'd been providing these services for a long time, but we just never really stopped and asked ourselves, independent of if we want to be a software business or independent of what we would like to see happen, what is it that we're doing that's keeping people around? Because there was something that we were doing different that was demonstrably different than what the this generic managed media industry out there was doing. When we had a customer, they stuck around. Our retention was very high. So we knew that there was something that we were doing, but we just couldn't really distill down into a first principles way. What was the thing that we were doing differently? Because people weren't paying us because we knew how to put an ad on Facebook or on the ESPN website. That stuff was really easy. What we had the space to do once we sort of said, once we admitted defeat, we had these really fundamental questions, and we realized that we are PathLabs created this category called media execution partnership, which I won't bore you guys with because that's not super relevant. But what was a big eye opener for us was this idea of how do you be different, not better? And that was there's a book that, I know everybody recommends books, but if there's one book that I would ever recommend, it's Play Bigger, and it's all about category design. And category design is about being different, not better. And so that applied really well to PathLabs because there was something that we were doing very differently than what other people were doing. And it was this idea of this, we're not managing your ad campaigns, we're your media execution partner. So we're bringing the people, processes, technology, just not our own technology. We're using other people's technology, and we're giving them the entire easy button for running that side of their business for them, so they can be marketers and we can be the execution team, not a vendor. Was that helpful? Does that make sense?
I think so. So once you felt like you had established why and how you were different, and you were able to market that, that's what allowed you to, reliably get customers.
One is product market fit comes before message market fit, right? And so we did kind of have the product market fit. People, when we acquire a customer, they stuck around. What we were doing was adding value was solving their problem, right? But we couldn't necessarily articulate it. So I think you necessarily have to have the product market fit first. But just because you have product market fit doesn't necessarily mean that you know how to go sell it and how to package it up, right? And so everybody talks about product market fit. There's not enough talk about message market fit.
Cool. Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, thank you.
As a logical follow-up, Jeff Honk at Utopian Health. Have you figured out how you're going to market in Ledger AI to solve that same problem? Because you're moving from a pure, you talk about your ad agency, larger B2B almost a distributor model to something closer to B2C in these small businesses?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So interestingly enough, we're not going to go to market as Ledger AI. Ledger AI is kind of going to look like a company that has these separate vertical specific brands underneath it. I just think that the future is there's going to be so many solutions. There's going to be so much software. You're going to have to get really specific moving forward with a very specific customer profile, because there's just going to be so much noise competing for those same customers. And so we want to do something that necessarily looks almost like too boring or too small to most people, which is to just provide this really big solution to a very small specific set of customers. And so the short answer to your question is definitely not. We don't know, but our go-to-market is vertical specific. And then we're just gonna do it for one vertical, copy and paste it to another. But people want to talk to peers, experts, people who know their business really well. And so we think this, we're not another bookkeeping service. We're not different. We're not better, we're different, right? We're not a better bookkeeper. We're actually a fractional back office solution. And again, most people who hear that be like, oh my God, that is the most boring business. And we love that, right? Because it's almost, but it's very painful. The back office is super painful for small business owners. And so our thesis is that the message of quit worrying about having a bookkeeper, an IT guy, HR, payroll, and managing all these different vendors, put it under one roof and have it this one entry point is going to be will resonate, but that's just a theory. Who knows? We don't know yet.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We've got so many questions from both when I see hands going up, especially I'm curious because I know you alluded to the fact that you want to go into restaurants. I've got Nicholas Wicks here, who is a restaurateur. But before we do, Tom Sturgis had a question out of Missoula. I want to make sure that we go to Missoula.
Hey, Tom.
So, Tom, you want to bring it up?
Yeah, sure.
I can ask it? Okay.
Yeah, I know you did some really cool stuff with the university. Did that prove fruitful for LumenAd, PathLabs, and do you plan to continue engagement with higher education? Specifically, what should we make heads or tails of AI, and what should students be preparing themselves for?
Yeah, it was a fruitful strategy, Tom, and that was not a very risky bet to make. Thanks to you guys, you pioneered that model. So we just kind of copied you. So thanks. That was great. But yeah, you guys, for those who don't know how closely ATG partnered with the University of Montana and how they kind of built a curriculum and then transitioned it to post-graduation. Tom, I won't actually butcher your model because I'm not totally sure how you guys did it, but we partnership with the university, and I'm sure it'd be similar to MSU was very strong. PathLabs ended up creating a 400 level marketing course that was all about media execution. And that was an industry that was evolving so quickly that there was no university course teaching students how to do this, but there was so much education needed. And so it was a class that kids could take. And we pretty much were teaching people how to do the work for PathLabs. And then from that, we recruited out of that our interns, and we hired into the roles out of our intern classes, right? And so it was a really cool partnership, and props to the university for being willing to be moved so fast on that stuff. So all I can say, Tom, is that yes, we hope to partner with UM because again, it was such a great partnership. What that's going to look like, we don't actually know yet. It's still so early that it's all just a hypothesis. But we hope to engage at least the accounting program at UM a lot, and maybe some of the other classes in the business school. But although we haven't talked to them about that.
Yeah, very cool. Very fast-moving, incredible recruitment tool. And honestly, I think I got to put my 2 cents in there. I think UM has been a lot more adept at working with the business community and the employers in Missoula to build out that curriculum. And it's largely because of the 2 that you just heard from, Tom Sturgis and Ryan Hansen, I think pioneered some of those programs. Just putting a little shout out there as I sit amongst a bunch of people in Bozeman. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question. My name is Jada Colin Jones, and I'm curious about your vision for acquiring these smaller businesses potentially. I think I caught that right. And if you're going to use that for a client acquisition purpose, or more so lean into their expertise and then maybe build like a Gen AI agent with that, what's your vision?
Yeah, the reason for actually acquiring these back office service providers was, one, it's a luxury to be able to do, to just like have the capital to do that. But before we sold PathLabs, we were thinking that LumenAd Holdings was like technically the entity that was acquired. PathLabs was underneath it, and the PathLabs has this unbelievable management team that, although it wasn't by design, I wasn't trying to do it. I joke, they put me out of a job. They're so impressive, and they're gonna PathLabs will be $1 billion company under MIQ. I know it will. But so I kind of got bored, and so I was doing other projects under the LumenAd Holdings umbrella, trying to figure out what else we should do, because I didn't think we were ever going to sell it. I didn't think that there would ever be a potential buyer that I think would take as good of care of it as we did. MIQ is the one crazy exception. That it's a very cool company, but again, I won't get into that here. So I was doing a bunch of we were messing around with all sorts of products and ideas, and we were building a lot of different software ideas. And after doing that a couple of times, I realized honestly, instead of spending so much time building a piece of software and then trying to go sell it, I'd rather go acquire service providers who are selling services and delivering something that people find value, and then we're just going to make it tech enabled, right? So they've already solved the problem of the product market fit problem, and people they're solving a problem today. And so that's why we're hard coding that, because I think we can skip 7 steps into just we know that people find this valuable. Because there's something about going totally back to 0 to 1, finding our first couple of customers, that I just don't know if I want to go all the way back to square one and find a couple of customers. But then we are building our own AI agents, and we're calling the AI agent Penny, and Penny's going to be the kind of the line of the first line of defense for talking to customers, but we'll seamlessly integrate between Penny conversations and human conversations. So what that specific solution looks like, we're trying not to be overly prescriptive yet. We just have these. We're going to close on a bookkeeping company where we hope to close this first deal in the next couple of weeks, and so we're just going to kind of try to grow bookkeeping and then start adding other services and whatever. So it's going to be very kind of all over the place for a little bit, and not super interesting or innovative.
Cool. Sounds interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to try to get through 2 questions here because we're getting short on time. So Jason, I'm going to ask the question for you. So, and it's more philosophical on AI, but with AI advancing at such a rapid pace, how do you prioritize integrating ethics into your business model? And what steps are you implementing for bias and fairness checks in your tools?
Yeah, it's a good question. So we're a big believer in humans in the loop, and keeping humans in the loop for a long time, which is why, again, it's the services as software. We don't think, and nor are we really trying to solve the problem of pure play AI by itself and the ethics within that, because I think that those are super fair questions, and we're not going to be the ones to crack that nut. We want humans to be in the loop for quite some time, and I think it's going to take a lot longer than I think a lot of people are willing to recognize, just how far away we are from pure play AI doing a lot of this work and asking some of the questions that you're asking. So I know that's not a very sexy answer, but we're just going to take a less remarkable approach to it, and kind of in this crawl, walk, run sort of model.
You're going to be in the weeds, working directly, kind of building out agents for SMBs for a while now. So can we look to you as a resource?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just as much of a student as you guys are. We have, what I started Ledger AI with a really badass technical co-founder. Her name is Ashley Mulligan. She actually lives in Arkansas, but we worked together at LumenAd for a long time, and she spends a lot of time in Montana. And we hired our first AI engineer last month, and he's a real badass. So they're the experts right now. I'm not, but we're gonna just again, the nice thing about starting with services is that we don't necessarily have to get super innovative on day one. We're just gonna we're gonna buy these services businesses. We're going to help just make their lives easier and incrementally, and then we're gonna slowly layer in this heavily supervised way AI agents to start taking like some of these workloads off their plate. So anyways, yes, you're more than welcome to reach out to me. I'm a student like you, and we're just going to go figure it out.
Well, hopefully we can learn together, but getting in some sort of like Montana feedback loop on like what's working in AI sounds good to me. So Nicholas, since you're sitting right next to me and we had a bit of a chuckle over you, Ryan getting into restaurants as his beachhead, I'm gonna hand it over to you.
Thanks, Jenny. Ryan, I really appreciate your time and sharing your insights and pains from mistakes. On the mistakes front, you mentioned having more money to make more mistakes. Can you speak to that a little bit, specifically in terms of how you convey that specific startup value prop to investors? Like how do you talk about that? So it's somewhat two-pronged, because you talk about the pain of your mistakes with a huge smile on your face. so kind of the importance of having that runway, right? I guess it's the kind of technical term, but also how you convey the importance of that to potential investors and partners.
Are you saying like, how do I take that and as I talk to investors now moving forward in this new venture, is that what you mean? Or historically when we were raising money at LumenAd?
Yes.
Gosh, I'm trying to make sure I understand that question. We did not spend a bunch of time fundraising. I would actually not say that I'm an expert in like talking to investors and raising money. There was, it was not necessarily something that was part of our model. It just eventually got to a point where, again, on paper, we had a bunch of revenue, we had a bunch of customers at LumenAd, and it just seemed like, oh, let's go transition to software, and so let's raise some money. And Next Frontier is just like, I had known Will, and Will's an amazing person, and I just like the Next Frontier people. That in the grand scheme of like the amount of money we raised was pretty small. Like we did like a $2 million round after we had like 70 employees and whatever. So in my experience, raising money was, it was not my experience that like these investors were not expecting us to make a bunch of mistakes. I think that they kind of like knew that and part of their model. And so the only thing that I thought was absolutely impossible was to like keep these investors involved when we had no idea what this business was going to look like in 3 years. Like we did not have an investable thesis. And so for me, it was just like candor, transparency, communication to say like, this has to stop. So as far as it relates to like moving forward and talking to investors, again, we're lucky to not, we can just like bring our own cash to this, which is nice and fortuitous. Eventually we'll want to find those investors, but once we have an investable thesis. But the other thing that I would say is like, it's really important to find investors who agree with who are aligned on like the investment thesis, right? Like we are not going to try to be a $10 billion business. We are not going to go the VC route. Like we're necessarily talking about kind of like boring services businesses. Yeah. Like we're not. So there's a lot of investors out there who would see our point of view that like it's a different thesis. Now, I don't know if I'm answering your question.
You definitely touched on it. I'm asking somewhat from an investor standpoint, but also from a startup owner standpoint. I think it's really important for both sides to recognize that stumbles, trips, navigating landmines is actually one of the ingredients to success, right? And I think it's really important for both sides to kind of recognize that. But it's tough to convey that as part of, as a value prop to an investor, right?
Totally.
Help me make mistakes. Really? Are you sure? So anyway, I appreciate your thoughts on that, and not to take up too much time. But as Jenny said, I am also a restaurateur and a quasi restaurant operator, and so I'd love to, at some point, hear about your thoughts on efficiency in the back office of restaurant.
I would love to. We are actively trying to talk to restaurateurs to get some data points. So I would love to chat. But yeah, I think that to your first point, my accounting degree allowed us to be more comfortable with the numbers and understand how much cash we have coming in. I was closer to the financials to be able to like make better decisions. And it was a lot of in the early days, it was like we can make a lot of mistakes, but the only thing we took very seriously was just it's so simple, but just don't run out of money. Just don't run out of money. It seems so simple, but we had the time to make a bunch of mistakes. And really, I don't think that I'm a particularly I'm not necessarily smarter than anybody else. We just were able to take a bunch of punches, and kind of what we say is we just failed forward long enough until we figured it out. And as long as you're like comfortable with change and uncertainty, and you can get punched in the face a lot and then like keep going and just recognize that like we need to learn from this and do something different. That's really all we did. That was the key to our success more than anything that we weren't geniuses. We just bought ourselves enough time to figure it out.
Very cool. Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay. We've got a question in the chat, but it's 1 o'clock. And so I want to be respectful of people's time, particularly during the holidays when time is so precious. So Mike, I apologize that we didn't get to your question, but I'm going to connect you two on just a follow-up email, and I'll connect Nick and Ryan afterwards as well. But I mean, all that said, I guess Ryan, everybody, let's take our mics off of mute and let's give him a big round of applause. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Jenny.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, Ryan, it really is always a pleasure to talk to you. Your humility is like kind of paramount, but your aptitude for learning and not being afraid to swing for the fences is an inspiration for all of us. So thank you for moving pretty fast and for being pretty relentless in creating categories here in Montana.
Thanks a lot. I love Montana. I'm excited to keep doing it. And yeah, my goal is to just never have to stop. So yeah, it's feel free to connect me with anybody who's in the chats or whatever, Jenny. And yeah, thanks everybody for joining.
Okay, well, happy holidays, everyone. We are going to be back next month. We are lined up. We've got Jack Alton from NeuroID. They were recently acquired by Experian, so we're very excited to hear the story of NeuroID. And he is going to be chatting with Scott Chisholm of Highland. So that's going to be a really cool conversation. I hope you guys can come back and join us. That is online, and you can read all about Jack and Scott on our website and register to attend. But thank you so much, everybody. Happy holidays, safe travels, and we'll see you in the new year.
See you, everybody. Thanks, Jenny.
Thank you.